Well, hi, I am just thrilled to welcome Erith Jaffe-Berg back to UCI. Erith is professor of theater at UC Riverside, and she is a totally inspiring person who combines deep historical scholarship with performance. Her specialty is Jewish theater in the Italian Renaissance, and she just partnered with LA-based Theatre Dybbuk and the podcast series Judaism Unbound on a fascinating project called Bovo-Buch. Erith, what is Bovo-Buch, and what did your team do with it?
So first of all, Julia, thank you. And I'm equally thrilled to be here with you. And I find equal inspiration from you and the work you did. So I want to start by saying that, well, Bovo-Buch is a chivalric romance written in the 1500s and written in Yiddish. Yes, it was written by a man named Elia Levita, who was a grammarian and a scholar at the time. And in the early 1500s, around 1507, he writes this chivalric romance, which is an adaptation and a translation into Yiddish of a circulating chivalric romance that was known in Italian as Uovo d'Antona, and also had an English text that it was based on, and that's called Bevis of Hampton. It was written in this sense of providing some fun reading for women over, the Sabbath, in Yiddish Shabbos. And of course, we understand that though it was read by women, it was probably also read by men who didn't want to confess and admit that they were reading this. It's a wild tale of adventure and of near death, of escapes, of love, and I should say of multiple loves, because there are a few love objects here. And ultimately, of course, it has a happy ending. But it is a crazy and wild and inspiring tale, and it sprinkles in a lot of references from the Jewish and Yiddish world.
Beautiful. And so how did that become a podcast? How did that become radio theater?
Right. So I had been collaborating for some time with a theater company known as Theatre Dybbuk, which is a Los Angeles-based theater that does sort of culturally engaged work that borrows and touches on the Jewish experience, but then expands much, much beyond that. Could we create a soundscape that is both shared and intimate, where people are living separately and are hearing the podcast, as we do in our own living rooms, homes, or maybe taking it out while we go jogging or walking in the neighborhood. So we have a very, very intimate connection to what is being said, but also we are experiencing this with it being in touch with the wider world, right? Because so many people are listening at the same time. And I thought this would be the perfect vehicle to do that, because the original would have been probably spoken and read out loud and shared with a community. So the idea of creating a soundscape was really enticing to me.
It is wonderful to listen to. I listen to it during my walks, and it's funny and informative and really unlike anything I've heard. So I definitely invite all of our viewers to check it out on their own.
Mit Drucianen vertreibt seine Zeit.
A long time ago, there lived in Lombardy
The king looked him over from top to bottom and then had him trot up and down.
So she set off for the city, riding faster than an arrow
so
from the
that they
bowstring.
might seize and bind Bovo.
She shouted out to them, and when the sailors saw what it was,
And as I held him in my arms, his spirit left him.
Take everything you want, and do not suppose I'll deny you anything, and even were you to take it all.
Now the highborn king had a beautiful 18-year-old daughter. No man nor woman ever had a finer figure or a more splendid body. Her eyes were like two flashing garnets. She was indescribably lovely. People called her Druciana the Fair.
So your scholarship focuses on Jewish theater in the Renaissance, especially in Italy. And I think for many of us, it's kind of a surprise to hear that the Jews were doing theater in the Renaissance. Tell us what you think we need to know. Who made it? Who attended? What are the languages? What's up with this topic?
Thank you. So, Yes, I agree. It is a little bit surprising that the Jews who we think about in this period being either exiled from the Iberian Peninsula or ghettoized into these ghettos in northern Italy, that the Jews should be making theater. And yet it was happening. So in the late 1400s and about 1475 or so, we know of a production that was staged along the Adriatic coast of the Italian peninsula in the town of Pesaro. And it was staged by a very famous Jewish dance master who was working, yes, at the time there. And that then there was a subsequent performance that was also staged about a decade later. And later on, we find that these performances that were happening in Pesaro sort of had an influence on what was happening in more central southern Lombardy and in this specific town of Mantua. And in Mantua, which was also a real headquarters for Commedia dell'arte, which is the professional theater that was created by actors and actor troupes in the 1500s in the Italian peninsula. In Mantua, the dukes, who were the Gonzaga dukes, the Gonzaga family was ruling at the time, they welcomed in Jews and allowed Jews to exist in Mantua. In fact, Jews had been there since the Middle Ages. And they encouraged the Jews to also participate in carnival performances starting in the 1520s of producing and creating performances. Now, what kind exactly? We don't know. We know there were comedies in the early stage. Later, as the century wears on, we know a little more because we have some texts that are actually still extant, which is very exciting. So the Jews were doing a combination of things. They were participating in the civic life of Mantua by performing as a way of having a tribute to the Gonzaga rulers. They were partaking in the carnival performances, which is actually paradoxical since the carnival is a Catholic celebration. So this is not necessarily obvious that they should be doing this. And they were also performing for the weddings and big events, state events that
like Shakespeare.
Shakespeare, so much so. Yeah, exactly.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, Midsummer Night's Dream was probably written for somebody's wedding. Imagine. So that's just really fascinating. Your most recent book is on Commedia dell'arte and the Mediterranean, Charting Journeys and Mapping Others, which was published in 2015. And I brought in one of my Commedia dell'arte masks to show.
Beautiful.
And can you tell us just a little bit about how masks like this were used in the Renaissance?
Yes. So the Commedia dell'arte makes use of these masks that are, what we just saw you pull up is a half face mask, right? So if we were to put that against the body, we would actually, or against the face, that would allow a lot of freedom for the mouth, which I think is really important when we consider the kind of European masks that these are, as opposed to, let's say, no masks that we're used to seeing from the Japanese world, because the mouth is freed so that the wearer of the mask can actually speak very clearly. And in some cases, the masks, which were generally made out of leather, had a little piece of fabric attached to the bottom part of it so that would connect seamlessly to the skin and again allow a lot of movement for the mouth, which is really important because the type of theater that was created wearing these masks is a theater that amplified and celebrated language and multilingualism, which is why the book was really looking at the ways in which Commedia dell'arte is a pan-Mediterranean phenomenon in which we have many different dialects, many different languages that are being performed in a single performance.
Erith, in addition to being a scholar, you are also an actor, right? You're a member of the Son of Semele Theater Ensemble, as well as a frequent collaborator with Theatre Dybbuk. So can you tell us how you bring together practice and research in your career?
So I am an actor. I have always been interested in performance and have been since high school days, really. And I didn't think initially that you could combine the two, doing research and performing, but my life has actually unfolded in such a way that they've been very mutually complementary. So So early on, I discovered that you can, through practice, actually do quite a lot of research, right? You learn about your subject matter by actually performing it. And more recently, this has led me to these collaborations with different theater companies. Son of Semele is one, Theatre Dybbuk is another. And with using performance, be it a full performance or a reading, and sometimes I work as a performer, as a reader myself. Sometimes I work as a consultant on these performances. I've directed as well. And it brings up different questions that I might not have asked myself, even when I was sitting in the archive, had I not thought about, the materiality of the performance. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Erith, thank you so much. And you've performed here at UCI and lectured here at UCI a couple of times. And so it's wonderful to have you back as part of our Shakespeare Center. And we look forward to hearing about your next project.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.